All right, Steeler fans, it's Friday, second half of the podcast. Time for the All Betz Are Off segment with Jeremy Betz. Jeremy, what's up?
Man, not much. It's an exciting weekend though for NFL fans at the NFL Combine, and looking forward to seeing all the news and notes that come out of there.
And we'll talk about the Combine. Before we do that, I talked about this the entire first half. I felt that the NFLPA grades were they're subjective, we'll put it that way, but there's some truth in there. And I gave my thoughts. I'm curious what you thought when you saw the grades for the Steelers.
Yeah, some of it is just like workplace environment type stuff. I mean, that's really the majority of it. And then you start to think about some of the more intriguing aspects like the ownership grades and what all that entails, and how your head coach is graded, and facilities and stuff like that. It is what it is. I like you said, it's subjective. Some players in certain positions are going to grade things higher than others who might have different needs, and there's a lot of subjectivity to that. What stood out to me from it is the fact that the Steelers players seem to really believe that their head coach is there for them and that the ownership isn't there for them as much. And willing to do what it takes to create a culture that, or not even a culture, but like an organization that is wanting to reach the goal that the players want to reach, which I believe is Super Bowls, and I believe is success late in the season. They think their coach is doing that. They don't think that ownership is doing it the best it can to get them there. So lots of things to take from that. I think some confirmation of some of the thoughts that we've had and we've talked about on similar shows to this, but it is intriguing nonetheless how it all comes together, and seeing some teams who haven't sniffed Super Bowls or playoff success in recent years graded so much higher. It's very intriguing to me how it all plays out.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I kind of alluded to this in the first half of the podcast. If I'm a strength coach or the dietitian or nutritionist for the Steelers, I'm sweating. I am sweating. Let's back up the tape. So they had a new strength coach this year. It was his first year. Yeah, the previous strength coach retired. He moved on with his life's work, and so they hired this new coach. What are you known for the most? Oh, having Russell Wilson push a sled and having him injure his calf on the first day of training camp. That's what you're known for. And then you deal with a slew of soft tissue injuries to the point that Mike Tomlin in his postseason press conference, he brings it up on his own. He's not asked about it. He brings it up on his own. And then the grades come out and they're like, yeah, we don't really think that the plans are good. I would be concerned. I'd be concerned. And the fact that the dietitian part, like the players said they didn't think they were around enough. And I'm sorry. Right. I said this in the first half. I'm a health guy. I'm a fitness guy. I have a personal training background, which is not a strength coach. I understand that. But your job is twofold with a team: injury prevention and increased performance.
Yeah.
I don't know if they did that. And from a dietary perspective, you need to do everything you can so that what the players are putting into their body gets the most out of their performance. That's the crap that pisses me off, because that stuff doesn't cost a lot of money. We're not talking about building a new facility. Get people that are competent at their job. I don't know. You agree or disagree?
I do. And that was the aspect of it that I wasn't thinking about when giving my overview. It's a very well, and I should be, because it's super important. And like you're saying, and what stands out to me when talking about all this is that it's the margins where I think that the Steelers players feel like they're being gypped, and it's where they could get a little bit extra help, where they feel like they could be improved in the minutia to where they can put a better product out on the field. And the ownership ties into all of that, I think, because it shows a care and attention to your players to put those things into perspective. And I would be interesting. I didn't dive into it this deep, but to look at that correlation between the ownership grade and like the facilities grade, the support staff grades, what that looks like in comparison. Do owners with higher grades, are there higher grades in those areas too? That'd be interesting to look at, because the Steelers were very low in both. I think it was the biggest drop from like in grade in the league at the strength and conditioning side of things for the Steelers in that survey.
It's interesting. And the thing is, there might be some players that are pissed off about the way the season ended. I'm not sure when they do these surveys. I'm sure it's towards the end of the season. But still very, very interesting. And I will reiterate this again. Well before these were made public, Art Rooney II said to Jeff Hartman, that's who it was. And you can go to her Twitter account, and she has the clip from her interview with Art Rooney. He said, we see the writing on the wall. We're kind of outgrowing this facility. So either we spend a ton of money to upgrade it, which means you have to build like other buildings, or we abandon it, give this to Pitt, and then we move and build a new facility somewhere else. He knows it. Like, so I think some of the complaints about like the size of the weight room, like you can't physically change things like that all the time. Like, it's just, it sucks. And I think some of it might be some of these players coming from either college programs where their college locker rooms are vastly superior, or they're coming from some other NFL team. Think about Patrick Queen. The Ravens have a phenomenal facility. They call it the Castle for a reason. It's Under Armour is the main sponsor for their drinks. It's remarkable. It is crazy how sophisticated that is. You go to Pittsburgh and you're sharing it with a college team. What the hell is this? I get it, but all right, I don't want to spend too much time on this.
Sharing it with a college team, and their locker room is 10 times nicer than yours anyway.
Is it really? Is that Pitt side better?
When you were looking at I saw it on X where they had pictures of the locker room. Maybe it was Pitt's training facility, but I thought that was all shared. So I don't know for sure, but the Pitt locker rooms look insane. And then you go to the other side where the Steelers are, and it's like, oh, what are we doing here? Hey, look, everything's yellow. That's great. That's awesome.
Well, but let's be honest. I mean, you were an athlete. I was an athlete. I didn't care two F's what the locker room looked like. Did I have a place for my stuff? Do I have a place to sit down? Yes and yes. Okay, let's move on with life. Maybe these guys are cushy. Maybe they are spoiled and they need there are some colleges that have barber shops in their locker rooms. It's insane.
Right. Now,
I don't know.
When I was an athlete, it wasn't my profession, so
that's true.
I wasn't living there, 3/4 of my life. So that plays into it a little bit. But
you're right. That's point well taken. All right, let's go to the combine now. Thursday is when it officially got underway with workouts as the defensive lineman. But you were kind enough to put together a list of players that the Steelers have formally met with, and mainly focusing on the defensive front in the article that ran on Steel Curtain Network. We're going to update that every single day with the latest crop. So this morning, it's probably live on the website right now. Go check it out. And you have the newest tweets and all that stuff. Any surprises for you of the list of players?
No, not at all. I'm not surprised at all by anything that I've seen so far as the meetings go, like the formal meetings. It's a lot of defensive linemen, and that's the stage we're at, right? It's basically all of the guys who are in first or second round consideration, and then a smattering of guys on day 3 that you would look at as well. That's the type of guys that we saw the focus at the Senior Bowl, that Mike Tomlin basically had his eyes glued to the defensive line the entire time he was there. He probably figured out what dormitory they were in and slept in the hallway. I mean, that's the kind of thing he was looking at. And then you saw a couple linebackers squeeze in there. So those are guys that are like later on in the draft as well. So maybe that's a target later on. But then the running backs too, some of the bigger names at running back. And while a guy like Ashton Genty, a lot of people might say, well, maybe that's surprising because we don't think he's going to be there at 21. The Steelers should do their due diligence on this, because it's a guy who you could bring in obviously on a rookie contract. And after seeing what the Eagles did with Saquon Barkley this last year and the difference he made for them, it's kind of the thought process for me comes out that if you can find a gold jacket type guy, maybe it's worth going that route in the first round because of the difference he'll make on your team, especially for a team that wants to run the ball. So that might have been the most surprising of them, just based on where they're picking and the type of player it is, the position it is. But other than that, it makes total sense to me that you're talking to Ollie Gordon, another running back. You're talking to Ashton Genty. You're talking to Alfred Collins, defensive tackle out of Texas that has second round type hype. That you're looking at a guy like Kenneth Grant with all the measurables that you would want in an interior defensive lineman, which is where it seems like the Steelers' focus is. No surprises for me there. I think if they would have gone heavy after like an edge rusher or something like that, that's in the first round range, that would have been interesting. Some of the linebacker types, but they didn't do that. So no surprises for me.
Now, before we leave the combine, I guess I want to ask you, because you bring up running backs, and should they take running back in round one? And I heard you and Andrew have this conversation on your Steelers Fix podcast. I have no problem with the first round running back. My question is, do they have the line to block for said running back? And so going with Genty, let's just use that as an example. Do they have the line to open up the holes? I don't think they do. Do you?
So I'm going to say this has a two-part answer for me. Number one, Ashton Genty makes your offensive line look better than it is. He did that at Boise State. He creates for himself after contact, before contact, great vision. And then the second part is that I do think the Steelers have the pieces as far as the players go. I don't know that they have the coach. And that's always been the consternation for me, is like, why is Pat Meyer still here after what we've seen from the offensive line and how it crumbles and how the running game hasn't been good for years now and hasn't been successful? Now that they have invested in the offensive line, why didn't they make the choice to improve the coaching that's going into that group as well? So I think that they have the players in the starting five to be a good offensive line, to be a good run blocking offensive line. But if the coaching is going to lack, then maybe you do need a guy who can transcend what you've been able to put together from a coaching and offensive line perspective to make it better. Ashton Genty is that kind of player. I don't know if you get beyond the first round, if there's anybody that you would look at, maybe Amarian Hampton out of North Carolina, that brings that type of upside, not to the level of Genty. He's the kind of guy who you look at and you say, if I can put this guy on my team, he instantly makes me better no matter what I've got in front of him.
Do you think people would have said that back in 2021 about Najee Harris coming out of Alabama?
I don't think so. He was always more of a grinder type back. He was a good player and a guy that was definitely in first round consideration. You saw the durability and a lot of the things in Pittsburgh you saw out of him that made him attractive at that point. The explosiveness never really showed at the NFL level. Genty has more traits than that. He's more in the Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon Barkley type range of player than Najee Harris was.
Okay, fair enough. Now, I do want to ask you, Omar Khan spoke, and he didn't say much in terms of quarterback and stuff like that, but he did say that Cole Holcomb could have potentially returned to help the team. Does Cole Holcomb potentially being healthy in 2025 change the way you look at the inside linebacker position going into this offseason?
You know, I like it even without him, with a couple low-key free agent signings potentially or additions via the draft. But if he's healthy and it makes sense for the money, then, you know, there's a really good chance that he could be beneficial to your team and give you maybe a 4-deep group as opposed to even a 3-deep group. That makes a lot of sense. And the Steelers use their linebackers more than most. They ask more of their linebackers than most teams. So it could make sense. I just don't know if the contract value is going to math out for them. It makes sense to cut him for that space and maybe add some cheaper pieces around you, or use that money to go after something else. In my opinion.
That's fair. That's fair. Totally fair. All right. What are you looking forward to coming up in the combine heading into the weekend?
Yeah. The one visit that it hasn't posted yet, it probably will have posted by the time you're listening to this on the tracker, is the Quinn Ewers look, and that's going to be a mid-round quarterback. I'd be interested to see as it progresses which which quarterbacks the Steelers would want to bring in for a visit. It sounds like that they're going to be in on some of the mid-round guys, which makes sense to me based on what they're looking at for a starter this year. And then, the fact that it is very unsettled at that position for them. I'm also looking for the corners and wide receivers. That day is going to be electric. And I think the defensive backs are a sneaky team, or a sneaky side of the ball to watch, because the Pittsburgh Steelers need guys that can step up when the pass rush has been limited in game. They need some guys opposite Joey Porter Jr. and some young guys to work into that role. And I think that there's a good possibility in a good free agency class, but also a good draft class at defensive back, that they spend a little bit more time evaluating those guys and maybe take one a little bit earlier in this draft process.
Love it. Love it. We look forward to seeing how this thing plays out and what we learn about the Steelers, who they're meeting with. We'll talk about that a lot next week. But why don't you let people know what's coming up on the written side as well as on podcasts?
Yeah, so written side, I'm doing my wish list breakdown for each division, and then we'll be tracking the combine, obviously. And then on the podcast side, all the draft stuff that you can ask for. Check out the Steelers Fix. We had a lot of fun discussing headlines from the future, so check that out if you missed it.
Absolutely. Jeremy, as always, thanks for your time, man. Enjoy the combine. We'll talk next week.
Have a good one, Jeff.